Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Zach, and here I talk about overlanding, gear, builds, DIY, all sorts of stuff related to modifying your vehicle. I own a 2015 Toyota 4Runner, one of the sort of earlier 5th gens, other than like kind of the OG 5th gen years from 2010 to 2013. If you have any 5th gen or maybe even 4th gens, you might have similar control arms to what I have. And I don't have KDSS, but what I do have is a 4Runner with roughly 170,000 miles on it. So up here in Minnesota, these 4Runners, and really any vehicle for that matter, gets kind of beaten in the winter with the salt on the roads and all the moisture throughout the year. These vehicles kind of get thrown through the ringer as far as testing durability on metal and see what will rust or corrode fastest. So my lower control arms on one side have seized very badly. And so one thing I'll kind of recommend is if you're going to do this sort of an install at home, in your driveway in the Midwest, I'd consider going and getting new cam bolts, new sleeves. So the front has a sleeve and a bolt, the rear just has a bolt. I would recommend going to a dealer and picking those up, because if you get into this job and you're sitting in your driveway in the middle of a Saturday, you're not going to want to get up and go buy those bolts. Just having them on hand to return later, maybe if that's able to be done at your dealership, is definitely worthwhile, so that you don't get really pissed off working through that project. So I did exactly not that, and that's what happened to me. That's why I'm saying this. So I ended up using 3 new bolts and then kept one of my old ones and just cleaned it up really good with a wire brush. And I think it should be all right. So with enough anti-seize, these should hopefully be a lot easier to work on going forward. But yeah, I had some sort of issues with these Dorman lower control arms. Nothing as far as safety concerns or anything like that, but they've been squeaking really bad, and I think it'll only get worse throughout the winter. And I just wanted to kind of address this and kind of do a little bit of some side-by-side comparisons while I had a set of new OEM control arms, my really old ones, and then my Dorman ones as well. So hopefully this is helpful for you all. I'm going to do a bit of a top-down camera, comparison so you can see them all. And then I'll just walk you through the process of swapping these out on the vehicle. It's a pretty easy job. I will say, for tools wise, there's a lot of larger bolts. I don't know the exact size of the sleeve thread or sleeve nut that allows you to rotate those cam washers. Some of them it's like a 22, and some of them I've just been using a 30, maybe a 27 would fit. But the nut for the lower ball joint is, I believe, a 24, and then the lower shock mount bolt and nut are both 19s. So you'll probably need at least 2 combo wrenches or a mixture with a breaker bar, and then I have my heavy duty impact, so you can do 19s, 22s, 24s, and then 27 or 30. So kind of all those bigger range wrenches. So it's a fairly easy install, but it requires kind of that next tier up of sockets and combo wrenches. So just a forewarning, if you're not very stacked with tools and trying to do something like this yourself, you may have to take a trip to Harbor Freight or wherever your favorite tools are and go snag some. So I have a set of Icon wrenches that I really love. That's what I typically use. I bought a Pittsburgh set because I was kind of in a pinch, and I haven't liked them as much. They don't seem to have the tolerances that I would prefer, but my Icon set I really like. So if you're going to Harbor Freight, spend a little extra money on the Icon sets. I think it's worth it. All right, well, with that being said, let's jump over to the top-down camera, and then we will talk about installing these on the vehicle. All right, let's jump into it. All right, keep in mind my 4Runner's a 2015. It was probably manufactured in 2014. Here is what I believe to be the OEM control arm. So right here, this is the left side. We'll just quick show you the left side. So the left side, with an air hammer and a little bit of extra love, we were able to get these bolts out. I replaced the rear bolt just because I was able to get it out, and so I replaced it a little while back just to show sort of what's going on here. So we got a little bit of surface rust. Overall, extremely solid. This space for the shock, nice and cleaned out. I really like that. One thing I noticed on here too is, see how there's these little holes at the ends. I think that might be like some sort of way to grease these bushings. I'm not sure, but I think it could be. Some control arms that are like performance lower control arms have grease zerks in an area somewhere in here. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's for cooling, like I don't know. This is the strike pad for the bump stop. You can see I used it a few times. And lower ball joint, so, you know, looks fairly normal. It's sealed. And then we've got our boot there, which seemed to do all right. And everything. So, okay, that's your frame of reference on an OEM 2014 manufactured. You can see in here a little bit, kind of cracked. Okay, so let me just set this over here. Then, if we grab the right lower control arm, here it is. So here is the, I believe this is the rear, because the rear is what's seized. So there's the rear, this is the front. Honestly, both of them might have seized. Yeah, I think this is the front and this is the rear. So if you look, that is what a seized sleeve looks like. So this one actually was a bolt, not a sleeve, but this bolt seized within that sleeve. And then this is the sleeve on one side of the front lower control arm bolt. This part faces backward to fit into the washer for the other cam tab washer. And then this here, you can see the cross section pretty nicely. There's the sleeve completely seized inside of there. So I ended up cutting this completely off. I saved all the pieces because I thought it was kind of cool to see. You can also see how thick these are, which is pretty crazy. Let me just measure it for fun. 1/8 inch. Not sure what material it is, but it's 1/8 inches thick. Some sort of steel, I would presume. And these bushings too, you know, similar age to the other control arm I just showed you. You know, they're not dead, but they're pretty beat up. So that's just to give you a little flavor for the OEM control arm. Let me set the OEM control arm aside from my old set. All right, so here is the passenger side, right side OEM control arm. And I'm gonna grab my Dorman right lower control arm and I'll kind of show you them side by side. All right, so here they are. Here's the OEM, here is the Dorman. So looks to be like they've got similar holes on the bottom side. I don't know if they're exactly lined up. They might be slightly different, but I think these 3 large holes are the same. This one looks a little bit different, but I could be wrong. They could be perfectly fine. If we flip this over though, here is the first thing I really noticed. And that's that this lower control arm, I can't tell for sure, but this is starting to rub really bad on my lower shock mount, which I thought was really interesting. You can see that there. If we maybe turn the brightness up a little bit. So there's where it's rubbing. Now if we grab my right lower control arm just to see if like it rubs there the same as well, it doesn't look like it does. Like I ran these lowers for a pretty long time and nothing ever rubbed. So it's a little bit bizarre to me that it rubbed like that, but I don't know. These are just kind of like my first impressions comparisons, but these lower control arms squeaked pretty bad, and from the squeak I figured it was always the bushings. I was reading some forums online. A lot of people said that the bushings in Dorman control arms are squishy and they're not very serviceable and they go bad pretty fast. Those are some things I read. So I was getting a little concerned. So I went out and I bought some of this silicone lubricant. So this is the stuff that I bought. And it did all right for like a day. It was kind of surprising. I sprayed basically everywhere I could around these, you know, spots. hoping it would penetrate somehow, somewhere, in some way. And it seemed to help for like a teeny tiny bit, and then it just went away again. And all the lube must have gone somewhere, and they started squeaking like crazy. So I don't know if this little hole here was rubbed into place immediately and then it doesn't rub anymore or what. I didn't try lubricating these because I just started it, and it's starting to get pretty cold here in Minnesota, so I don't really feel like doing some field tests because I don't really care too much, but just interesting. And given the fact that I have these OEM ones here and everything, I just figured time to throw them on. So before I did, I wanted to show you some side-by-sides. The other thing I was going to show you is if you rotate this whole thing, there's nowhere to access these bushings in any way. So that was another thing I was just a little bit like bummed out about, is if this maybe was the solution, maybe there was a hole where I could spray grease to get in there, or spray some sort of silicone or something to be able to lubricate those, but I just couldn't find anything. So I don't know whether these ones are okay or not. A lot of people with these OEM lower control arms will also try and service them. Interesting thing I found out is to buy the front and rear bushings per side were like 100 and something from most dealerships. So I called the dealerships. I didn't go online to some of those like more affordable dealership stores. That's where I ended up ordering these lower control arms, and they ended up being just about like $290 a side. But when I talked to them on the phone, if I were to order them straight from the dealer with no discounts, they were going to be like $750 to $800 total. They were saying that these front and rear bushing assemblies alone were going to be like, I think it was $150 for the rear and $100 for the front or something. It was pretty expensive. So I just decided to not replace any of those things. Another thing I've heard, I've talked to some shops about this, a lot of people will go out and buy the red energy suspension replacements. And I've heard mixed reviews on those. I've heard they're budget for a reason. So just be careful if you're gonna order those. I heard from a lot of people that you should get the yellow Siberian bushings. They're a little harder to source, but I've heard they're a little higher end, a little more expensive. So if you're wanting to go the serviceability route and not just OEM, you could look into Siberian bushings to be pressed in to replace. I did this whole project from the start because I realized there was a lot of play in my lower control arm bushings. I also realized that I may have been driving with this for like a long time. It got really bad, but I think there was a long time where my bushings they weren't great, but they weren't destroyed, so it wasn't unsafe or anything. But they definitely are unsafe now. So I just I had to bite the bullet, and that's when I ordered these Dorman ones, like really last minute, just as like a saving grace, and that was a bad mistake. So I'm going with OEM because I don't really feel like pressing in my own bushings, and OEM for these lower control arms, most people talk about as really pretty beefy. So hopefully these work better. And yeah, I just wanted to get them all side by side and show you some of these things so that, you know, we could roughly speak to them. The Dorman lower control arms did come with castle nuts though, which is kind of sweet. These lower control arms did not come with them. It is what it is. All right, well, let's jump back out to the vehicle and let's get these installed. All right, so when we're prepping to pull off this lower control arm, it's pretty easy on non-KDSS. We're gonna pull out this bolt here. There's a bolt at the bottom for a bracket, and then I think there's two bolts actually, and then there's the two cam bolts. So before we pull them out, I always like to mark a spot on the washer and on the frame to line them up so it's pretty close to your original alignment, so that when you drive to wherever place you like to get your alignment, it's pretty close and your car doesn't drive too bizarre. So that's what we do. We'll mark that, and then we just start taking out some bolts. So let's get to it. All right, so once we pull out that cotter pin, like most things in life, you got a couple options. What we can do is we can loosen this by hand, so this will turn and hit against the lower control arm. And then from there we can loosen the bolt or the nut, or we can use power tool. And then either way, once we get this castle nut off, we can hit the top of this, pop this whole entire lower ball joint free. So that's what we're gonna do. This appears to be 24. This, if you wanna go by hand, you can go to there. You can see that's kind of where it starts to hit. I'm not gonna do that though, because I have power tools. And when you have this big electronic impact, it just saves you a lot of work. I set it to the max setting. Comes off so easy. All right, so now what we do is, this is a press fitting, so we basically need to shim these two sides so the ball joint can push down, because this is an angled, it's like a conical shape with the bolt jammed into it. So grab your favorite hammer, and it should pop free. If you're trying to keep these ball joints nice, you could put this castle nut on the end, but as you can see, I wasn't hitting super hard, but sometimes that will mess with your threads, which it might have here. Looks like we're okay. So you can, you wouldn't put it on this way. You would put it on backwards. Use the bad side of the nut like this. And then if you go flush, that makes a nice little area to hit with. So then you can hit it from there. But either way, this is done. This is off. You can clean up those surfaces if you want. And then we will put that on the new lower control arm. So now I gotta grab that. All right, so we are on the driver's side in America. Here is the part number from Toyota. And let's rip this off. See if it comes with a castle nut. It does not. Sweet. That's a bummer. Oh well. Okay. So bring this down here. Remember, this was flipped up like this before we hit out everything. And then this was, I believe, like so, so that hits. All right, so that's what we'll do. Maybe we'll borrow the Dorman castle nut. Otherwise, I could go grab my old OEM castle nut. We'll get this mounted up on the vehicle. So this might be a goofy thing, but don't buy cotter pins from the hardware store. Buy them in a massive pack. They're way cheaper. I got a 3/32 by 1.5 inch cotter pin here. So just in case anyone wants to use similar cotter pins to me because of the hole size through the bolt. I think I tightened that bolt down enough, but we'll check it again later. Okay, so now we'll grab this. What we want to do is put in the bolts, but nothing too tight, because getting the suspension bolt to thread is sometimes a little bit cranky, but shouldn't be too bad. I like to put a nice amount of anti-seize on these because cutting my old ones out was absolutely horrible. So it doesn't take too long, and it just will save you 1,000 headaches. All right, so we got these 2 bolts in here. Got our castle nut installed on the bottom. This is loosely tightened here, and then we'll tighten our other bolts once the vehicle is sitting on the ground. So that's basically good to go. Now we just got to go do the other side. So that's going to be a wrap for the install. Basically, once you bolt everything up, I make sure that the 2 bolts holding the lower ball joint are very, very tight. And then I lower the vehicle and I tighten the cam bolts and the shock bolt according to their torque spec, and making sure I line up my little marks. And actually just did that, and I kind of jerked the steering and suspension around a little bit on the road to make sure it kind of settled, got the oils moved back where they typically sit, and it looks pretty good from where it's sitting. So the toe wasn't adjusted too much, and if I got them in the same spots as the previous one, unless there was like major variability between them, it should be fine. So looks good for now. I'll still probably go get an oil change and a new alignment shortly. But I just wanted to kind of share this video and kind of give some of my experience. It's not a crazy interesting or overly insightful video, but some of you out there might be trying to consider performance lower control arms, maybe trying to consider OEM, these Dorman ones, the Moog ones. I kind of wanted to test the Moog ones, but these were cheaper than those. So actually got these for $100 a side. So they're pretty affordable if they were good. So I just wanted to see. But for kind of all the reasons I've talked about throughout the video, I'd probably just go find the OEM ones on one of those discounted OEM parts sites where some of the dealers around the country sell them at a discount. Seems to be the best way to go for these, and probably the longest lasting. So just sort of that buy once, cry once. If you did want to buy the OEM control arms, I'll give a little shout out. I do really like these Running for Tacos lower control arm skids. So I've been running these for not a year, but close to. And I really like them. I think they make the lower control arms look a lot cooler, but they also provide a lot smoother surface for things to slide over. So these OEM control arms are a little bit bumpy and curvy, and I wouldn't want stuff to kind of catch weird on them. For the fairly low price of these lower control arm skids, I think they're kind of a nice add. I don't think they're adding anything overly crazy as far as like, you know, structural support, but they're pretty beefy and they provide that smooth surface for gliding off of, which I think is the most important part about skids. They provide protection, but also if they're durable enough, they'll just be a sliding surface to get off. So that's probably it for this video. It's kind of a rambling video because I didn't entirely know how to really compare these things. I tried to do somewhat of a data-driven comparison, but this is a little more anecdotal and sort of forums-based. But yeah, my lower control arms were squeaking like crazy, and I couldn't hardly drive anywhere without them squeaking, no matter whether I gave it the brakes or gas, or definitely when I was hitting bumps. And it also appears that my lower shock mounts were rubbing as well. So who knows if that was the sole culprit? I don't really think it was. I think that the bushings were squeaking as well. But yeah, anyways, that's going to be a wrap for this video. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really appreciate it. If you like what I'm doing, consider subscribing. Helps me out. Helps me able to make more content like this. All right. Well, catch you in the next one.